Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber from inside the state capitol as the 2024 legislative session rolls on, and we are approaching crossover day coming up next week. So we thought it'd be a good time to get kind of a status report of everything that's been going on legislatively here at the state capitol. And joining me now are two delegates who can speak to that. Deputy Speaker Matthew Rohrbach and Delegate Joey Garcia. Gentlemen, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
This is mostly going to be kind of a macro look at everything that's going on and what's still to come, but I do want to begin with the latest piece of legislation that's been kind of a talker that just got through the House, and that's House Bill 4299, the bill that would allow teachers, K through 12, to conceal carry in those classrooms. And I want to set this up in context because a lot of times when we have these types of debates, it can get conflated and people try to make emotional arguments, and you get into the whole, they're trying to kill kids, or they're trying to put up neon signs that say there's no one in here with a gun, come on in and shoot people. None of that is real life. That's a lot of hyperbole. So let's keep it on point. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that the crux of the argument comes down to basically a scale where on one side you have safety, and everyone agrees that safety is paramount. The argument is, responsible gun ownership can be safe. The other side is deterrence. How do we stop this from even happening in the first place, which can be a very multi-layered, nuanced argument. So correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll begin with you, Matthew. The argument from the Republican side of things is if you arm these teachers responsibly and they know what they're doing, that is a deterrent for people to say, I'm not going to pick that school to commit this type of atrocity because if I go in there, there'll be pushback. Is that accurate?
Well, it's very accurate. If you look at the crux of the bill, no one is required to do this. And if they choose to participate, they have to have adequate training. So right now, we've basically declared schools that don't have a school resource officer to be a gun-free zone, which means that someone that's up to no good knows that as well as everybody else. This is just an attempt to try to get some responsible people trained that could be a deterrent to crime.
Now, one of the issues with that is you're making an assumption of responsibility, and I know that the argument from the left has been more guns just could mean more problems, no matter how you try to restrict it or regulate it.
I think it's to me, it's a little bit more about vetting and training with this particular bill. We did an earlier bill that related to school protection officers, which would have provided that, somebody who has been a law enforcement officer, a member of the military, they've had huge amounts of training and experience, that we allow them to come into the schools, and then we hire them as protection officers, not teachers, who could be distracted by other things. And I think that's one of the main things in this bill. The only training requirement is get your concealed carry, 24 hours of certain training. There's no test you have to pass. There's no background check. And those are things we put in this other bill. And I think that's the problem that we have is who is really going to get this. And it may be permissive or really voluntary for the individual, but not for the school districts. There was an amendment yesterday that said every school district basically has to have this now. And I think when we're force feeding that on our local counties and taking away their decision-making authority, I don't believe that's the right thing to do.
I know teachers unions do not support this. A lot of that could be partisanship, but have you gotten any feedback from teachers, from schools, from administrations about this bill?
I've heard from not only teachers, but parents and students that are concerned about it. And I made a remark yesterday. I met with some students that were 8th grade students back home. And I told them, I said, we've got this bill coming up that would arm teachers. What do you think about this bill? And it was funny that they immediately talked about the teachers they wouldn't want to have a gun. They joked about it, but in reality, I think there's some nervousness about the fact that this is moving.
How important would it be to make sure that the training is done in a way that that everyone that has a gun in that school knows what they're doing?
Well, first of all, the ideal thing, in addition to this, is to have more school resource officers and to have secure entrances.
Is that in the budget?
Well, we're working on the budget, so we don't have a budget yet, but hopefully that will be. But as far as training, I don't think you can ever have enough, but I don't think that you can legislate it out of existence that nobody's going to have a gun in school just because we say that nobody's going to have a gun. We all know that doesn't happen, that there are people up to no good, And how do we find that happy medium? Because we all want this to be safe in our schools, but unfortunately there are events that occur. So the real question is, how do we take care of this as quickly as possible? So having some people at school that are qualified and adequately trained is probably not a bad idea.
All right, well, it's through the House on the way to the Senate. Now we'll see what happens over there. Let's take a zoomed out version now of the session so far with Crossover Day coming up next week. As the Deputy Speaker, you have a leadership role with 89 strong in the House, the numbers for Republicans. How has the session gone, do you think, from the conservative side of the aisle? And are you happy with the legislation that's been passed, and what are you still working on?
Well, first of all, we have a lot of legislation left to do. As you have noticed, we have big agendas between now and Crossover Day,
Sure.
which is Wednesday. But the legislation to date, yes, we've been happy with, and I think we're moving the state forward. I think you're going to see some more things in particular about the budget upcoming. Really, you've seen very little about the budget, which is not unusual. The reason is we have to do all the other bills first, or have an idea where they're going to go to know the fiscal impact that we have to fund.
Right.
So you really, I can't say the budget's the absolute last thing, but it's got to always be towards the back end of the session. Now, all that being said, you're going to see a marked focus turned on to the budget now. But as far as other bills, there's going to be a big push here, because by Crossover Day, we're pretty well going to know what we've added, what we've subtracted, and then start on a budget in earnest.
And Joey, we were speaking before we started here about the first couple of weeks seemed to be pretty seamless, and then it, from the Democratic point of view, it got kind of off the rails a little bit. Talk a little bit about the session from your point of view, and the challenges that you face. Only 10 other Democratic colleagues in that body. How do you pick your battles?
Well, you gotta pick them, but in reality, I feel like, and I've had a cold for about the last month, probably because I've had to talk so much. If you're one of 11 and you don't like something, you can't just kind of stay silent. I think we've done so respectfully, though, and I appreciate Delegate Rohrbach and a lot of leadership as far as the way that we're treated with respect. But there's things that we don't like. There's a lot of things, I think, in the last 3 or 4 weeks, whether it's come through the Judiciary Committee where I'm minority chair, or whether they come to the floor, that have been a diversion, a waste of time, whether it be the so-called Women's Bill of Rights. I wouldn't say that about the debate that we had about the gun bill. I think that's an important debate, and it's a good faith debate. But there's a lot of red meat that's been out there that I think it's an election year, and that's been the focus. What has not been the focus yet, and I'm very hopeful it will be, is childcare. We have bills that right now I believe are in the Finance Committee, and they do cost a little bit of money. That's the number one ask of businesses that are here and that are wanting to come to the state of West Virginia. We haven't done that. Hopefully we're going to do Social Security and exempt that. I think that's a good bill. So, to be fair, there's some good things that are pushing through. I'm just hoping that we can get through these diversions and get to the real things that affect people's lives every day.
Do all of those things come down to money? I know Senator Woelfel on the other side, he's been big on the child care tax credits. He's going to run that bill. And again, it all comes down to the number crunching. We had AARP Day on Tuesday. We spoke with Gayleen Miller. That's one of their main focuses, along with the fraud bill, is trying to get rid of that personal tax on Social Security, saying you're basically getting double tax. You paid taxes when you paid in. Why are you getting taxed when you're getting the benefits? But again, is it just about the getting the abacus out and figuring out how much money you can allocate to all of these things?
Well, the Social Security bill that is before us now phases it out for everybody. Now, if you'll remember back a few years ago, we did exempt taxes on Social Security depending on what your income was.
Right. This
So
would just expand that.
It takes the cap off. So an awful lot of West Virginians currently don't pay tax on Social Security. But we're going to extend that to everybody, and it'll probably be phased in over 3 years. As far as the child care tax credits, we did credits last year for businesses, and we've expanded those. And now we're looking at several bills to expand it for individuals. And I believe that probably will be built into the budget this year. So that is an important part of getting the economy going in West Virginia, because the Republican caucus has been terribly focused on getting the economy of this state going. And I think you can see it with the job creation and the businesses that are chosen to locate in West Virginia. But to keep that going, we've got to have childcare in order to people to have families and yet be able to still work. So that is a very important pro-business piece of legislation that's also pro-family at the same time.
Now, less than a week now until bills have to get out of the House. What's the one piece of legislation that you want to push to make sure that it does get through?
So in that same vein with childcare, I think there's a bill that subsidies that are paid to childcare facilities, that right now they're paid based on the days that children attend versus just their enrollment in general. And that's about a $44 million fiscal note. I mean, it's not something to shake a stick at. But at the same time, in order to make sure that these facilities can actually continue to operate and expand, that is something that we need to give them that foundation. I really don't think there's a more important bill than that. I have not seen that come out of the Finance Committee, and I'm very hopeful, because if that doesn't happen, I think we may see closures, and we may make it harder to attract those businesses who that's the one thing that they're asking for right now.
And that's always tough. Anytime there's a fiscal note, you know what that means.
Let me say this though: we have money. We can't just throw it away. But we are not in a situation. I was here with Governor Tomlin and Governor Justice. We were in the red every single year. We have some foresight and the ability to plan out our future, and I think we have the funds to make that happen if we value those things.
Now, just because crossover day comes, it doesn't mean that you guys just stop working. Obviously, there's things that can be done. There's procedural things. You can tie bills in with other bills and try to maneuver things. Matthew, what do you want to work on, not just up until crossover day, but maybe all the way until you gavel out to make sure that the legislation that's important to you gets through?
Well, you're right. That's not the end of session on crossover day. That's for your listeners. That simply means that's the last day that bills that originate in the House can go across the clerk's desk on the way to the Senate.
Right, and then they can come back and things can get
well,
amended.
They often do come back, because Delegate Garcia will say, and then that's when the gamesmanship occurs, and that's also when we can take Senate bills, co-opt them if it's the same section of code, and run a House bill in it, and that's really when the games start. And it's not a game, and I don't want to make light of it, but that's really where the negotiation begins, to see what are the priorities for the House, what are the priorities for the Senate, and what can we compromise to make it work for everybody.
And are you confident that compromise is out there when you're dealing with 89 versus 11?
I mean, I think it's funny what Rohrbach said right now. I mean, I think when you get to the last 10 days, up to that point, there's some partisanship there, but we kind of come together, and then it's the House versus the Senate in a lot of ways.
Deadline pressure.
And in reality, there are good things that we can do if we focus on those things. And it's interesting, though. I mean, the stuff that you see come out of the House doesn't always end like that in the Senate. Same thing with the Senate. And so bills can change pretty dramatically. And so you always have to keep an eye out. And you know what? Nothing's dead until the very last clock strikes midnight.
And sometimes not even then, because the governor will bring you guys back for even more.
Well, I've served 10 years now, and I have never not had a special session.
And it's usually budgetary.
Correct. Yeah, it's most often budgetary. And the reason being, and this year will be no exception, we will have a large surplus, but you don't exactly know what the surplus is till you get a little deeper into the fiscal year, SFY 24, which is what we're operating in now. So I would expect May or June, there will definitely be a special session to appropriate unappropriated balances and excess monies. I can tell you from leadership standpoint, you can go ahead and count on that. That's typically done in an interim session that's already scheduled. Those usually aren't terribly controversial bills. Right now, we don't know the number. What is the excess going to be? We kind of have an estimate, but things can change in the next 3 or 4 months. So you will see a special session of a budgetary appropriation nature. There's no question about it.
One thing to watch too, I think, and this is why I believe the number's a little bit up in the air, is the personal property tax. We don't know what effect that's going to have, especially when it comes to refunds come April 15th. I think there's been a lot of projections, but that's one area that we'll see if it has the impact that was thought, or whether it's going to have a bigger impact potentially.
All right. Well, we thank you for your time, gentlemen. You talk about impact. There is a bill being run right now in the Senate that could have a big impact on driving the economy, and that's a hint of a word there. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but Delegate Matthew Rohrbach, Delegate Joey Garcia, thank you guys for your time today. We appreciate it, and good luck for the rest of the session.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with more Outside the Echo Chamber after this.
Are you ready to unlock a future filled with remarkable pay, unbeatable benefits, and unparalleled satisfaction? Imagine embarking on a journey that offers you a college-level education without the weight of debt, all while earning a steady income. Look no further than the West Virginia Building and Construction Trades Apprenticeship Programs. Join us, and together, let's build a future that's brighter and stronger. Go to actwv.org to apply today. The West Virginia Building and Construction Trades, where the future is.
At CAMC, our focus has always been on building better healthcare for you. Our new Center for Learning and Research combines cutting-edge technology with hands-on experience for physicians, nurses, and other caregivers. Using specially designed simulation rooms and robotics with expert instruction, our learners expand their expertise. Because you deserve the most advanced care possible, now and in the years to come. Welcome to the future of medicine.
Fair warning, if you go after our kids and young people, I'm coming after you. As governor, I'll see to it that fentanyl dealers get a mandatory life sentence, and I'll put human traffickers behind bars for life. To help our communities hire and retain the best first responders, I'll increase pay and benefits, and we'll provide better training for our police and our firefighters and our EMS, the ones who put their lives on the line to protect ours.
Welcome back inside the state capitol as we continue with this episode of Outside the Echo Chamber. Tomorrow is West Virginia Motorsports Day here at the state capitol. Still a big economic driver in the state, a big industry, a lot of motorsports fans out there. And joining me now is Senator Mark Maynard from Wayne County, because he is running a few motorsports bills in the Senate right now. We want to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about that and what it might mean for the state. And, you know, West Virginia has a history of motorsports, and it's part of really the fabric of those communities. A lot of people have stories about watching dirt track races growing up and everything. So just talk a little bit about your bills and what you hope to get through the Senate.
Well, speaking of Motorsports Day tomorrow, I want everyone to know there's going to be over 30 exhibitors set up in the rotunda, and outside there's going to be 30 different vehicles here.
Wow.
That represents nearly all forms of motorsports in West Virginia. So I welcome
quite
the
a
public
visual.
to come check it out. Yeah. So we first off, I can't mention this without giving some credit last year to the Motorsports Responsibility Act, which allows a little bit of flexibility for race venues to have a little protection and make the racers a little more responsible for their actions. So that kind of set the groundwork to invite in more motorsports opportunities for the state. But this year, we've got 809. And so that allows motorsports opportunities to come to the state and use some unused or little used roads in our state to conduct races on our public roads. And I know it sounds a little scary.
Like a road race.
It's motorsports events like they do in Europe with rally racing and stuff. And actually, in Vegas, they just spent $1 billion to have the F1 race downtown, NASCAR races downtown Chicago,
Okay.
and Grand Prix of Long Beach. So Senate Bill 809 kind of clarifies the language there and puts it in the responsibility of the Department of Highways. So looking forward to getting that to the finish line.
Nice use of a finish line.
Oh, yeah,
I
part
got
of
it
the
there.
fun.
Okay. So would this be more like a Formula One, like literally like a Grand Prix running through towns, or more of like a Watkins Glen where it's just like a road race, but it's still more confined, or maybe a hybrid of that?
No, this actually allows for use of public roads, but with thresholds put in for the Department of Highways to allow it or not allow it. It's currently in our code, but it needs to be clarified a little bit. It's just like cleanup language.
Okay.
So it's already legal.
Okay, and then the next bill?
Yeah, we've got 538, which is public nuisance. Sometimes you have this racetrack that is established and in operation, then somebody builds a housing development next to it, and that housing development can actually sue the track, and they knew it was there beforehand. This kind of protects the tracks from a little bit of legal problems down the road. 577 limits landowner liability. If someone wants to have a little event on their track, on their land, Senate Bill 577 allows them to do that with the person that's recreating on the land for whatever use, if it's kayaking or whatever. And you could even have a little event with this bill, so that kind of helps the people of West Virginia. 774 is not my bill, it's a Senate bill. It's a Mountain Bike Responsibility Act, and it will help mountain bike races come to the state, and because it's like the Ski Limited Liability Act, like that we have for our ski resorts. And many of our ski resorts have mountain biking during the summer, and this will help them have the same liability that they do with skiers. So this is a big bill, Senate Bill 824. That addresses the governor-appointed motorsports committee, and currently it's 5 members, and it doesn't specify what field of motorsports that these members represent, and it's a little inactive. And so this bill actually creates a position for all forms of motorsports in West Virginia. But it takes away any reimbursement. It's going to be a volunteer basis only, so there's no cost to the state. And these individuals can represent their field of motorsports that they love, and hopefully we can do something with the committee. It's a little stagnant now, so I've got that in there to do that. So got a lot of things going on.
Yeah, and when Governor Justice was first inaugurated during his first term, he made a big deal about tourism and about thinking big. And a lot of people, made references to him. Is he ever going to bring Dollywood here? But it would seem like there might be some opportunities for motorsports, and I don't know what the challenges would be, but why not think big? Why not dream big?
Yeah.
Is there any reason why we couldn't have a Talladega here eventually? I know a lot of people are like, there's no population for that, but I mean, Talladega, Alabama doesn't have a lot of population either, right? And that's right in the middle of rural Alabama. The challenge might be more or less the infrastructure around it, because for that one weekend, Talladega is the largest city in Alabama. You need places to put people, you need hotels, you need things like that. But is that something that's even on the table? Is that something that's even being talked about? Are we thinking that big?
I think so. Many times we've had NASCAR look at West Virginia as a possibility for a location.
It's so centrally located.
We're within a night's drive of half the population of the United States, which is actually our draw is better than Talladega, I'm sure, if you count where we're located. So, and actually West Virginia is the location of a previous NASCAR track in Ona that is currently still open. So that's pretty neat. Actually, 2 of Richard Petty's 200 wins were at Ona, West Virginia.
Is that right?
Yeah. So,
there you go. A little history lesson today.
Yeah, hopefully we can attract a lot of motorsports to West Virginia.
So what would that mechanism look like? What would have to trigger something to get to even talking about maybe, and maybe you might want to start smaller than that, but is that a possibility long term? Is that something that could be done, and what would need to be done to get there?
I really think it is, because many talks have gone a long ways toward getting a NASCAR track here. I remember probably 20 years ago in central West Virginia, the Skidmores had something to do with attracting NASCAR track here, and it just didn't pan out. But and even COVID kind of set us back a little bit. I've had people that were ready to launch in early 2020, and then when COVID hit, it set us back. But I want to thank Back Roads of Appalachia. They're a little motorsports automotive group they're located in Kentucky and West Virginia, and they're bringing events here. They just had a drifting event, which is, you need to Google it, it's pretty exciting, on Pluto Road in Beckley, and the Department of Highways allowed it to happen, and it was actually just for exhibition purposes. But Eric Hubbard and Jedediah Smith, they're working real hard to bring motorsports here.
Yeah. So you would need the land, you would need the hotel space, and I would imagine if you went to like a Marriott or a Sheraton, they'd be on board for those 2 weeks that you had those races, the spring race and the fall race.
I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll be packed. We'll charge our biggest rack rate we can. It's probably the other 50 weeks that they're concerned about, like how can we sustain our business model in a place where when there isn't a race going on? Do these tracks often have like other events going on throughout the year? I mean, how do they keep people at that venue when there's not a big draw like a NASCAR event?
Yeah, a big track will have events every weekend. Summit Point in our Eastern Panhandle is a road course like Watkins Glen. I don't know if you had heard about
New
that
York,
track.
sure.
But so they have something going on nearly every weekend, and we just have to diversify and bring in concerts at the venue and whatever we can do to keep the people coming.
Tough to not find a race fan in West Virginia. What kind of traction is your bill getting in the Senate? Do you think you're getting good feedback?
So far, so good. There's a couple in Judiciary Committee that needs to get out, but we've sent some to the House, and I named off the bill number, so hopefully our listeners can get involved.
Yeah, sometimes they get lost in the minutia of all those numbers. They just want to know, what does this bill do? And you did a good job of explaining that. And I think maybe the bigger draw will be those cars that are going to be parked out here tomorrow.
It should be exciting.
So,
you know what? I got to mention my dad. Some people just get into motorsports on their own, but I grew up, I was 8 years old. My dad started semi-professionally sand drag racing in about 5 states.
No kidding.
So I was an 8-year-old kid, and he had a Union 76 service station. I grew up across the street from it, and was able to, that's where he based his truck racing operation out of. And so it's just the ultimate kid experience. So I got to thank my dad for getting me involved in motorsports.
That's awesome.
He was a drag racer and just all automotive motorsports enthusiast his whole life. And he works on it. He still has his race truck today and gets it out every now and then. But
there you go. Well, you have to have him watch this episode so
he
can see that shout out. Mark Maynard, thank you for your time, Senator. We appreciate it. And hopefully you guys can get out here tomorrow and see the display of 30 different cars representing various motorsports throughout West Virginia, as it will be West Virginia Motorsports Day here at the Capitol. We'll be right back with more Outside the Echo Chamber right after this.
At Dutch Miller Automotive, we've grown quite a bit over the last 60 years, but our core principles remain the same. We believe in treating our customers and our team members like friends and family. And we see it as our obligation to give back to all the communities we are so fortunate to do business in. In just West Virginia alone, we've grown from 1 location on the west end of Huntington to 10 rooftops employing more than 500 Mountaineers. Check out the inventory from all of our stores at DutchMillerAuto.com. Dutch Miller Automotive Group, West Virginia proud.
When it comes to surgical care, you want the best hands behind the robot. And those are ours. Choose Mon Health. Feel the difference.
J.B. McCuskey is a lifelong West Virginian who has proudly served the state of West Virginia for years. He's running for Attorney General to keep fighting for our West Virginian values. Vote J.B. McCuskey for Attorney General on May 14th.
Welcome back inside the state capitol. That's going to do it for another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber, but we'd like to thank our guests today. Senator Mark Maynard talking about his various motorsports bills that he's running through the Senate. Tomorrow is West Virginia Motorsports Day here in the Rotunda. And Delegates Matthew Rohrbach and Joey Garcia to give us a status report of the session so far and what's still to come with Crossover Day coming up next week. We're getting closer and closer to gaveling out, but we will be back next Tuesday as we bring you another episode of Outside the Echo Chamber as we continue to discuss issues important to you and your family. Until then, I'm Rick Lord. Take care.